Welcome back, matriculants. Yes, to our third session on manufacturing accounts. I can almost see the smile on some of your faces. Why? Because this section is one of the sections that you need to smash in the exams. Why am I saying that? Because this section is obviously, the work that goes into this section is so focused, it's so structured, that once you can answer one or two questions in an exam paper, you know exactly how to go about answering a question of this nature. So once again, manufacturing accounts, I want to see a total on your exam paper, and I'm sure you can do it. Right, let's get into it. Let's look at the question and let's see what is required of us. The question for 30 marks, 15 minutes, always work with your time allocation in the exams. Don't spend too much of time. Like I said earlier, very important, in order to complete your question paper, you need to ensure that you work within certain time frames. Accounting is about testing your time as well. So please make sure that you try to stick as close as possible to the time guide that's given to you. Question. PD pencil manufacturers, the business produces one type of mechanical pencil. Carrying on with the information, what are we told? The following information was extracted from the financial records of PD pencil manufacturers on the 31st of October 2009. Immediately you know that that is your financial year end, 31st of October 2009, the end of the financial year. Right, important information. So while you're working with your question, as you've seen what I've done, certain bits of information you can highlight, you can underline, so you know exactly what's the end of your financial year. Important. Okay, but before I carry on, I'm going to repeat. And as I said, I may sound like a nag, but I'm going to do it each time I explain. What am I going to do? Yes, at this time, you should know this already. R, T, F, Q. Read the full question. We're not angry, we're not screaming, we're not shouting. Therefore, we'll stick to read the full question. No expletives, right? We're on national TV. Let's carry on. What information is given to me? I'm given information regarding the question. And therefore, what is important for you to do now is to look at this information and look at what is required of you. What are you expected to do? You are expected to prepare the production cost statement. Now at this point, if you look at your answer book, you're going to find that you are given a blank answer book. So this means that when you walk into that exam hall, into that exam venue, you need to ensure that you know your formats in accounting. Please guys, do not walk into an exam room and you haven't learned your formats. If the format is given to you in exam, well done, no problem, but don't expect every format to appear. So therefore, my appeal to you is make sure that you know your format. Let's go into the question itself. It says here, now watch, you will notice that I have detail written in already into my answer book. That is because I've done it beforehand. You would have a blank here, and therefore, what I'm talking about when I'm referring to this format, I'm referring to the detail that appears in my production cost statement. You are expected to know it. Please, don't walk into the exam room and you haven't learned your formats. Okay, so we go directly into the question. The first thing that we're required to work out is our direct materials cost. Let's go to the question and see. Do we have it there? In my information, direct raw materials cost. There's my information. Can you see it? Immediately what I do, I tick it off. Why? I'm going to use that information, 1,770,000 into my answer book, 1,770,000. You can clearly see that this was information that I took from my given information. What do I need next? Next, I need my direct labor cost. Can you see that? Direct labor cost. So, into my question, direct labor cost, what? A question mark. Now what do? Panic? Certainly not. As I said, don't fear when Ashraf is near. Let's look at the information that's given to us. What do I know? If I look closely at the question, I see that I'm given something that's called prime cost. Do you see that? 2,745,000. So therefore, my prime cost is 2,745,000. Remember, this is given information. Once again, that's where we got it from the information that is provided. Now, let's look at this here. What do we know? What do we know in accounting? What gives me my prime cost? Obviously, my prime cost is made up of two things: direct material plus direct labor. And I have my direct materials and I have my prime cost. So in other words, in order to find my direct labor, what do I have to do? This is what I do. I take my total, which is 2,745,000, 2,745,123, and I subtract my raw materials, the direct materials, which is 1,770,123, which is equal to 975,000. Can you see what I've done? I had to do a calculation in order to calculate what? My direct labor, which is 975,000. In other words, if I add that plus that, what is it going to give me? It's going to give me my prime cost of 2,745,000. Got that? Easy, isn't it? I told you. Just keep focused. Don't panic. Don't go into a panic mode. Unfortunately, with grade 12s, when you see a question mark, immediately you start panicking. Maybe we should put some stars or something like that, just to get the mood a bit lighter. So don't panic. Wait and see, okay. Obviously, they're testing my ability. What do they want me to see? They want me to see, do I know? Do I understand the concept? What concept? That direct labor plus direct materials will be equal to my prime cost. Okay, now what happens? Next one, factory overheads. Let's go and see, do we have that? So as you work on your question paper, make a note. I've dealt with that already. I've dealt with my direct labor. I've dealt with my direct labor. I've dealt with my prime cost. What am I working with now? My factory overheads cost, which is 827,000. So factory overhead cost 827,000. Got that? What do I now do? I add. What do I add? I add my prime cost plus my factory overhead cost. Let me do that. 2,745,123 plus 827,123 to give me a figure of 3,572,000. What does that become? 3 million. Let's get that figure again. 3,572,000. And where did I get that figure from? That figure I got from by adding my prime cost plus my factory overheads to give me 3,572,000. Next one, what do I need? Now obviously, what can you see from this here? If your format is done, immediately it becomes so much easier for you to find the figures that you are looking for, because you focus. Now I need my work in process when? On the 1st of November 2008. So into my question once again, work in process, 1st November 2008. There goes. That's what I'm looking at. 37,600. That's the figure that I'm going to use in my production cost statement, my work in process. Which work in process is this? This is my work in process at the beginning of the year. Please, important grade 12s. Do not confuse yourselves with your two work in process figures. You are given a work in process at the beginning of the year and a work in process at the end of the year. Just a bit of explanation on the work in process. What is my work in process? When I walk into a factory at the beginning of my financial year, do I find that everything has been manufactured? Do I find that all the pencils have been manufactured? Certainly not. I'm going to get certain pencils then that are in a semi-state of production. In other words, on the last day of the previous financial year, these goods were not totally manufactured. Got an idea now? This is what we mean by a work in process. Those pencils that have not been totally manufactured come the end of the financial year. Therefore, at the beginning of the financial year, that will be my work in process for the beginning of the financial year. Got that? Great. Okay. What was the figure? Let's go back to it. Work in process, 37,600. There, 37,600. What do? I add these two figures together. Let's go. 3,572,000 plus 37,600, which is equal to 3,609,600. Is that correct? I think it is. Calculators don't lie. 3,609,600. Remember, this is a work with figure. What have you done? You've added your total cost of production plus your work in process to give you this figure here, which is a work with figure. In other words, you continue to work with this figure. Next one, what do we need? Now we need our, let's take this a little bit down. Now we need our work in process on the 31st of October. This one here, what date is this? Do you think it is? Do you recall? Yes. This is your work in process when? At the end of your financial year. Got that? Okay, let's go into the question. Work in process at the end of the year. There's the detail. Aha, another question mark. But we're not going to panic, aren't we? Why? Because we're going to keep a steady head. We're going to make sure, okay, right, time to think now. What's happening? They have not given me my work in process at the end of the year. So they have to give me something else. There must be some other information that I can use in order to arrive at that figure. Got it? Brilliant. And what do you think it is? Let's look at the question. If we go through our information, there's my admin cost. It's certainly not that. Factory overhead cost, I'm sure we've dealt with this one. Remember, we've used the factory overheads cost. It's not my selling and distribution. It's not my sales. It's not my cost of sales. What is it then? Aha, somewhere along here, there's something that I haven't ticked off. There goes. There goes. Can you see what I'm talking about? My total cost of production of finished goods. In other words, this 3,525,000 is my total cost of production of finished goods. And there's it. There's where it's going to be slotted in. The total cost of production of finished goods. What was the figure? 3,525,000. In other words, grade 12s, I've got a work with figure here. I've got a missing figure here. And I also know that my work in process at the end of the year must be subtracted. So I've got to take that figure and subtract a figure from it to give me the 3,525,000. Got that? In other words, the 3,525,000 plus that figure, I'm working backwards. Remember the operations. That minus that will give me that. And if I say that plus that will give me that figure. Got it? So I can calculate it, can't I? Let's do that. 3,525,000, 1, 2, 3, minus 3,609,600 is equal to 84. Can you see the negative 84,600? It's telling you that you need to subtract how much? You need to subtract 84,600, which is what now? This is my work in process at the end of my financial year. In other words, on the last day of the financial year, when we closed shop and we said, thank you guys, here's your bonuses, go home. What was the value of the stock that was let me repeat that. What was the value of my goods that were in a semi-state of production? In other words, these pencils were not totally manufactured, but were not, we started manufacturing them. They are in a semi-state of manufacture, but not completed as yet. And therefore, that becomes my work in process at the end of my financial year. Now watch, this is how we go about answering a question of this nature. So once again, let me repeat. Whenever you are given question marks, please guys, don't panic. Keep a cool head, keep a balanced head, and tell yourself, okay, now this examiner is testing me to see whether I know that my work in process at the end of the year must be subtracted. Another important point, whenever we subtract in accounting, we indicate by use of a bracket. The use of that bracket is critical. You are telling the marker that I know what I'm doing. I am subtracting this figure, this 84,600, this one here that you see here. I'm subtracting it to arrive at my final answer of 3,525,000. Obviously, remember something else. If that is 3,609,000 and this is a smaller figure, it indicates to you that you have to subtract. Next question. Let's see what is required of us. We are expected to calculate the cost of production per unit. Got that? Now here again, there are certain formulae, there are certain ratios that you have to learn. Unfortunately, you have to learn it. And my appeal to you is, with regards to the ratios in manufacturing, put them on a chart, put them alongside the mirror, mirror on the wall, because that's where we spend some of our time. And by reading it alongside the mirror, it's going to refresh your memory. You're going to remember your ratios. You're going to apply your ratios when it comes to the examination. What are you expected to calculate? The unit cost of production. In order to do this, you need to take your total cost of production. Remember, we calculated it. Here goes 3,525,000, and therefore that's where we're going to use that figure, 3,525,000. You're taking the total cost. What did it cost you to produce all the units? It cost you 3,525,000. Next thing, what do you divide it by? You divide it by the number of units manufactured. Do you know how many units you've manufactured? Let's go and see. Do we know that? Let's check the question. So far, that's the information that's given to me. And there, 2.1.2, 750,000 pencils were produced during the financial period. Calculate the cost of production per unit. You got to understand the question. What is it that the examiner wants from you? The examiner wants you to calculate the cost of a single pencil. What did one pencil cost me? And therefore, what do? I take my total cost of production and I divide it by the number of units produced, okay, which is equal to 4 Rand and 70 cents. In other words, each pencil cost you to produce 4 Rand and 70 cents. Now, if you walk into an exam room and you don't know this ratio here, if you don't know the ratio, then you are not going to be able to do the calculation, guys. So please, I'm begging you, I'm imploring you, please make sure that you know your ratios. Now this sounds familiar because there are ratios when we did companies as well. These ratios are unique to manufacturing concerns. So please make sure that you know these ratios. Okay. Next question. 2.1.3. Let's look at the question first and see what is required. Calculate the net profit. Now, you need to know how to do that. How do we calculate our net profit? Let's go back into the question and see what information do we have that will allow us to calculate the net profit. Now watch this. This is important. Please watch this. Remember, I've used up all this information. Okay? I've used that. I've used that. I've used this one. I've used this one. I've used that. I've used that. I've used that. I've used that. What is left on the information that I haven't touched? Clearly you can see it. You can clearly see that, sorry, there's an error here. I haven't used this one here, so I'm going to delete it. Selling and distribution has not been used, okay? So an error on my part. Let's just remove what I've deleted. In other words, going back into the question, this has been dealt with. All the information that I've deleted here, I've worked with it. What has not been used? Looking at it, there goes. I haven't used my admin cost. I haven't used this one, so I'm going to circle it for you. I haven't used my selling and distribution, so I'm going to circle it. I haven't used my sales, so I'm going to circle it. I haven't used my cost of sales, so I'm going to circle it. Now, this shows you, can you see, when you use a certain pattern, when you work in a structured manner, you can clearly see now, why has that information been given to me? Obviously, it's going to help me in answering the question that follows, which is what? Let's go to the question. It says, calculate your net profit. And what is that? It's your sales. Let's take that figure. It's my sales figure. We normally know that in order to calculate my gross profit, it's sales minus cost of sales. Got that? And if we look at that, there's it. 6,390,000. Now it's dealt with. There's my sales figure. I've worked with it. I've taken it into consideration. Less my cost of sales, 3,337,000. Sales minus cost of sales. Going back to the question, what have I not worked with as yet in my income statement? What information do I need in my income statement? I need my selling and distribution cost, and I need my admin cost, because these two costs here do not affect my production cost statement. Do you see that? At this stage, you should know that. So what are the three costs that would go into my production cost statement? Direct labor, direct material, and factory overheads. You've seen that when we drew up our production cost statement. In other words, my selling and distribution and my admin cost will go into my income statement. And that's where I now say minus 810,000, which was what? 810,000 was my admin cost. Notice I've used it now. And minus 603,000, which was what? My 603,000 was my, there's it, my selling and distribution cost. So in other words, I've used up all the information regarding this question, and therefore I can see that my net profit would be 1,640,000. Once again, a recap. In order to calculate your net profit, it's your sales minus your cost of sales. Okay? Notice, sales minus my cost of sales minus what? My selling, and this one was my admin cost, I think it was. Let's just confirm. Admin was 810,000. That's correct. There's my admin cost minus my admin cost and minus my selling and distribution. So these two cost accounts will impact on my profit. And what will this then give me? This will then give me my net profit. And that's how we calculated the net profit. To repeat, you take your sales minus your cost of sales subtract your administration cost, subtract your selling and distribution, and that's how you get your net profit. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the question. Now, an important consideration is that this is a question that says 2.2. In other words, it's not linked to the previous question, and you need to take cognizance of that because it's important. It's an independent question. It has no bearing on the previous information. Let's look at the question. The business produced 4,100 garden spades for the year ended the 31st of October. The following information was extracted from their books. They give you information regarding the sales, the total sales, the variable costs, the fixed cost, and they also give you the per unit costs for your sales, your variable cost, and your fixed cost. Okay, now let's look at the question. Calculate the break-even point for the year ended 31st of October 2009. Do you know the ratio for the break-even point? Come on, you should know it. But if you don't, here goes. It's your total fixed cost. It's your total fixed cost, yes, divided by your selling price per unit minus your variable cost per unit. In other words, grade 12s, if you don't know these ratios, say goodbye to 5 marks. Is that what you want to do? Certainly not. You don't want to do that. And therefore, make sure that you know that your variable cost is what? It's your total fixed cost divided by your selling price per unit minus your variable cost per unit. Let's go into the question. Okay, let's look at the information that appears in the question. It says here that my total fixed cost is, let's get the amount, 348,500. Therefore, in my calculation, 348,500, that's my total fixed cost. What do? I divide it by my selling price per unit, which was, in my question, selling price. Remember, it's the per unit price, not the selling price as a value, but rather the per unit price, which is 150. Okay, there's my 150 minus my variable cost per unit. Once again, variable cost per unit is 70 Rand into my answer minus the 70 Rand. 150 minus 70 is equal to 80. Okay, now let's pick this up on the calculator. We have a value of 348,500, which was my total fixed cost, divided by the unit cost, which was 80 Rand. Remember, after you calculated it, your selling price per unit minus your variable price per unit, you divided it, and it gives you an answer of 4356 or 4357, depending on the rounding off. Both answers would be acceptable. That's it. What have we done? We've now calculated what? The variable cost per unit. Okay, let's go into the next question. We are now told, should the business be satisfied with the number of units that are currently produced? Explain. Okay, now what do you need to do? You need to go back and ask yourself the question. What's the question? The answer obviously is no. Why not? Because we are producing 256 units less than what is required to break even. In other words, we are producing 4356. That is the number of units we have to produce in order to break even, right? And if we look at the question, what do we find? We find the following. The business produced 4,100. We've only produced 4,100. And what is the break-even point? The break-even point was 4,356 units. As a result of this, you can clearly see that we are producing 256 units less than what is required to break even. In other words, the important statement that you have to make is they will make a net loss. Why? Because the break-even point is at the point where there is no profit, neither is there a loss. In this scenario, we are producing less than the break-even point, which means we are then making a loss. Got that? Brilliant. Okay, next question. Despite the fact that there was an increase, this is important, there was an increase in the price of raw materials. The price of raw materials increased. The direct raw materials cost per unit decreased from 32 to 27. Strange, isn't it? There was a price increase of raw materials, but the cost per unit decreased from 32 Rand to 27 Rand. Give a valid reason for the decrease. Can you think of one? Come on, you should be thinking of one. Let's look at our possibilities here. 1. Greater care or efficiency in the use of raw materials. Absolutely. Although the price increased, we've exercised such great care when producing that we were more efficient using less raw materials, and therefore the cost per unit decreased. Or tighter control over the use of materials. In the past, lackadaisical, using it nilly-willy as we wanted to. Now, tighter control, more efficient, less wastage. Better quality of raw material. Yes, in the past, the raw material used to be defective. The quality wasn't so good because of a result of better quality, less wastage takes place. Definitely. What else? Better training of workers. Obviously, the more training your workers undergo, the better they perform. And the better they perform, the more efficient they are, and the less you're going to use of the raw material. As a result, it's going to decrease the unit cost of the raw materials. And obviously, it says here, the raw materials obtained at a cheaper price. We said that despite, let's look at the question, what did it say? Despite the fact that there was increase in the price of raw materials, so obviously this one here will not hold true. This will not be an acceptable answer. Why? Because they're telling you, what did they tell you? Despite the fact that there was an increase in the price of the materials. Okay, so therefore that particular one would not hold true. So these are possible responses that you could use in answering this question. Let's look at the next question. Despite the fact that there was no increase in wages during the year, the direct labor cost per unit increased from 20 to 28. Give a valid reason for the increase. Let's look at it. It could mean that your workers were working overtime. Yes. What happens? Sometimes you got to work overtime because you cannot complete the production in the given time, during normal time. It could also mean that there was a decrease in productivity, working slower, lazy workers, demotivated workers. All of these result in what? You're producing at a slower rate, as a result of which it takes more time to produce. As a result of the increased time, you've got to increase the cost of labor. Unproductive workers due to power cuts. Yes, you get systems crashing sometimes, and you have to take a break because no fault of yours, and therefore unproductive time. Meaning what? It means that during that time, no work has taken place. Therefore, you are forced to pay your workers overtime because now, during the power cuts, there's no work taking place. And as a result of no work taking place, you've got to now use work during weekends, work overtime. And as a result is, although the wage rate stayed the same, but you had to work overtime, you had to work during times when your workers normally would not have been working, as a result of which the rate increased. The rate your labor rate increased. And as a result of that, it pushes up the unit cost of your labor. So therefore, these are questions, and it also, look at the question, you'll see it says, any valid reason. You could come up with another totally acceptable reason. And that is why we're saying in accounting, another appeal to you. I'm making a lot of appeals to you. I hope you're listening to me. And you're registering it, because never ever leave a question blank in the exams. Because if you leave a question blank, what does the examiner do? Or what does the marker do? That's it. 0. No response. When there's no response, nobody can help you. Whereas, if you write something and it makes sense, then definitely what will happen is you will see that the moment you have a response, you would get a mark if the reason is valid. Okay, that now brings us to the end of that particular question. We're now going to move on to the next question. In this question here, let's look at the question. Time allocation, 55 marks. You got to complete it in 33 minutes. Please try to stick as close as possible to the time that has been allocated to that question. Bacona bin manufacturers. You are provided with information relating to Bacona bin manufacturers for the year ended the 28th of February 2009, financial year end. What do we know? The business makes and sells only one type of product, namely plastic rubbish bins. Okay. What is expected of you? What do they want you to do? They want you to prepare the following notes to the production cost statement. Notice in this question, you are expected now to do the notes to the production cost statement. Which notes? The direct raw materials cost, the direct labor cost, and the factory overhead cost. So before you can actually do the production cost statement, which is 3.1.2, they are expecting you to do the notes to the production cost statement. Let us start with the first note, namely the direct raw materials cost. Okay. What do we need here? In this question here, we need to work out what was the cost, what was the direct cost of raw materials that was used in the product. You're going to start off with the opening stock. Let's get to the question and identify that figure for you. Now, once again, look at my information. Remember, we've spoken about the love arrow in accounting. Yes, once again, you have to use it. Watch this closely. 1st of March 2008, 28th of February 2009. Beginning of the year, end of the year. There goes. There's the love arrow, indicating to me that that's the start of the year and that's the end of the year. Got that? Brilliant. Let's start off by saying, it said there, raw material stock opening balance was 57,900. Into my question, opening stock of raw materials, 57,900. Okay, then what do I need? I now need my purchases. And I go back to my question and I see, what information do I have? There's it. Raw materials purchased for cash and credit, 1,622,700. So therefore, open a bracket, always work with a bracket, and let's get that. 1 million, what was the amount? 1,622,000, 1,622,700. Okay? And what else do I know? What else do I know? Defective raw materials returned to suppliers, 23,100. Okay, so now, obviously, that affected my purchases. Why? Because these materials were returned to suppliers. So what do I do in my bracket? I say minus. These goods were not available. Therefore, I subtract the amount, which was 23,100. Okay, let's do the maths. 1,622,700 minus 23,100 will give me a figure of 1,599,600. Now, obviously, you're not going to do what I'm doing. What are you going to do? You're going to go and pick up your calculators and you're going to enter the digits to get to your final answer. Please, it's important for you to get accustomed to develop a relationship with your calculator. I've spoken at length about the calculator. Just a friendly request, make sure that you are au fait with the calculator that you are walking with into the exam room. Sounds trivial, but of extreme importance. You know exactly where your digits are. You know exactly how to go about doing your calculations. Okay, done. Going back to my question, what else do I have? Carriage on raw materials purchased, 28,800. Carriage on purchases, 28,800. Okay, now I've got, what do I have? I've got my opening stock, I've got my purchases, I've got my carriage on purchases. I add those three items together. Let's do that. 57,900 plus, that's that one, okay? Add to it my purchases figure of 1,599,600 plus my carriage on purchases, which was 28,800, which is equal to 1,686,300. Okay, there's the materials so far. What else do I know? What else can I check on? Let's go and see what I can check on. My raw materials on hand at the end of the year. Remember, you can see this, guys. Don't take for granted that it will always be 2008 in the first column and 2009 in the second column. They could transfer those dates. Therefore, important, draw that arrow. The moment you work on your question paper and dates are appearing in two columns, draw the arrow. Closing stock, 34,200, 34,200, and because I'm subtracting, I indicate the figure in brackets, and going there, minus 34,200 will give me 1,652,100. What do? I took that figure, which was which was a work with figure. I worked up to that point. Remember, I added that plus that plus that to give me that figure. I subtracted that figure to give me the 1,652,100. Note number one is done, the direct materials cost. Let's go on to the next question. What is expected of me to calculate in this particular note? I need to work out the direct labor cost. Okay, let's look at the information. What information is given to me about my labor? Okie dokie, here goes. Wages. Office workers, not my concern at this stage. Who am I interested in? The factory workers, direct labor. Do I understand the concept of direct labor? Direct labor are those workers who are directly involved in the making of the product. In other words, my factory workers. That's right, who are in the production process. Now, a question mark again. Hey, these guys got nothing better to do than just give us question marks all the time? Come on, you can handle it. See information 4 below. What do they tell us? There goes, information 4. Factory workers in the production process. Number of factory workers, 12. Unchanged throughout the year. In other words, you've worked with 12 workers from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. 12 employees. Number of normal hours worked by each factory worker during the year. How much did each one work for? 1,600 hours. And what do we know? Number of overtime hours worked by each factory worker was 240 hours. What was the wages rate? What was the normal rate? Remember, normal rate in this case is 60 Rand per hour, and obviously overtime rate will always be higher, in this case 100 Rand per hour. So we do a calculation, guys. Come on, can we do the calculation? Do we have the information? Certainly we have. What do we know? We know that we have 12 workers, don't we? Times, what did we say? Each one worked how many hours? 1,600. So back into my calculation, times 1,600 times the rate. Yes, what was the rate? They worked at 60 Rand per hour. So times 60, and let's do this calculation. What did we say it was? 12 times 1,600 times 60 to give me 1,152,000. So immediately I've got my answer here. 1,152,000. Do you see that? What was that for? Remember, that was normal time. But my employees also worked what? Overtime, didn't they? Here goes. Number of overtime hours worked, 240. Back to my, where I'm working, we said 12 workers times 240 Rand, 240 hours times, what was the rate? Let's find our rate. Watch, the moment there's overtime, immediately you can see that the rate changes. Obviously, your employees will be paid more. In this case, 100 Rand per hour times 100. Let's do that calculation, and we find that we have now 12 workers times 240, number of workers times the rate. There goes 288,000. Immediately I now do what? I add my normal time plus my overtime, and if I add that together, I'm going to get a figure of 1,440,000. There goes. That added together is going to give me my 1,440,000. Now what's important here, grade 12s, is for you to show the calculation. Important. Why? Because let's assume you get one calculation incorrect, you could still get part marks for the other calculation. So please, once again, show your calculations. Was it all about the workers that we had? No, we had other information as well. What do we know? We are told that if we go back to our question here, what are we told? Let's find it here. UIF contributions to be allocated to each specific cost account. In other words, factory workers, is that my direct labor? Certainly it is. Those are my employees. That is the UIF that we, the business, have contributed on their behalf. On whose behalf? On behalf of the factory workers. As a result, 11,520. Watch what we do. 11,520. That will be my UIF contributions. If I add these two components together, which one? The factory wage plus my UIF contribution, I add them together and it gives me a figure of 1,451,520. That's it. What did we get? We got 7 marks out of 7. Why? Because we know exactly that direct labor cost deals directly with workers that are working in the manufacturing of that product. Got that? Brilliant. Do you see how easy it is? Do you see how if you sit and apply your mind and you work systematically, how easy the answers are going to become? So please, grade 12, watch the method. Watch how we go about answering a question of this nature. All right, let's go on to the next part of the question. What are we supposed to do now? The next one says, the factory overhead cost. Okay, so everything now, we are focused. What are we focused on? We are focused on everything that deals with the factory. Got that? Okay, let's move on to my solution and see what do we have here regarding what I need. Okay, first one, indirect materials. Now the first thing that I do is I open up a bracket. Why? Because it's going to involve a calculation, and then I go into my question and see what have I got. Factory indirect materials, beginning of the year, guys. Remember the love arrow that we alluded to earlier on? There goes 8,100. In other words, this was the value of my factory indirect materials at the beginning of the financial year. Please understand that and do not confuse those two figures. So 8,100, I go into my note and I say fine, 8,100 is my opening balance of what? Of my indirect materials. Then what do I look for? I go and look for other information. What else do I know regarding indirect materials? Here goes, let's find it. We should have information here regarding our indirect materials. Let's find it. Did we buy indirect materials for the year? Let's check. There must be a figure somewhere in the information. There goes. Factory indirect materials purchased. You see that? Okay, and the amount is 125,900. So into my note, 125,900. Do I have any other information regarding factory materials? In this particular case, no, but there could be information. There could be a return. There could be defective materials. There could be indirect materials stolen. Whatever the case may be, look for the information. In this case, nothing, but what else do I know? Looking at my note once again, factory indirect material stock, when? At the end of the year. That's right. How much? 7,400. So therefore, minus 7,400. Do you see what I've done? I've taken my opening stock of materials plus what I've purchased minus what I got left over at the end of the year. So please, an appeal to you, show your calculations because part marks are given to these here. All right, now what do? I add all of that up, 8,100 plus 125,900 minus 7,400, and this will give me a figure of 126,600. Got that? Okay. Next one, indirect labor. What do I know about indirect labor? Remember there was something that we spoke about earlier on? Let's see what are we told. We are told that salaries of the factory foreman. A question arises. Is this indirect labor? Certainly it is. All those people that are employed in the factory but are not directly involved in the production process, their cost component would fall under indirect labor. Got that? In other words, examples of these would be the factory foreman, people that are cleaning the factory, those people that are maybe repairing the machinery in the factory, and all related cost. Working in the factory, not directly involved in the production process. So there goes, 241,000. Into my question, indirect labor, 241,000. Okay, now, what else do we know? Let's check. We are told here that in terms of the workers, let's find it. There's your factory workers. Can you see? Watch this please guys. UIF contributions to be allocated to each specific cost account. That has been dealt with. But this one here, the factory foreman, the factory foreman's UIF contribution, please, that is also a cost to the factory. Therefore, the 2,410, I'm going to take it, put it in here, 2,410, add my two components, and I'm left with an answer of 243,410. Got that? Brilliant. Next one, factory maintenance. Let me see, what am I told about factory maintenance? Factory maintenance, here goes, identify the item from your question, 85,000, no further information. Immediately I know that that's a final figure, 85,000 for factory maintenance. In other words, what am I saying? Don't just take for granted that that's a final figure. It may be subject to some kind of an adjustment or additional information. Let's go and look at the next one, which will clearly illustrate to you what I'm saying. Rent expense. Here goes. Rent to be allocated in proportion to the floor space. See information 5 below. So let's go to information 5. What are we told? Let's get it clear so we can see what are we told. There's it, floor space. What are we told? We are told that the factory uses 1,200 square meters, the office uses 600 square meters, and the sales department uses 600 square meters. In terms of this, the entire building has been split up into what? Watch, 1,200 plus 600 will give me 2,400. And now, I know that 1,200 is a half of 2,400. In other words, guys, what are we saying? Open up your rent expense. Let's pick up the amount. The amount for that one was, let's pick it up, rent expense. Where is our rent expense? Let's find our rent expense. There's it, 133,000. Got that? Okay, into my solution, 133,000 was the total amount that we had paid for rent. Was it the total amount of rent for the factory? Certainly not. Why? Because we've seen information telling us what? That in terms of my, let's pick it up from here, what do we know? That here's the information. The factory only uses 50%. That's right. In other words, here we say times 50%. Why is that? Because the factory only uses 50% of the floor space. It would be unfair. It would not be justified to charge the entire rent into the factory, but it has to be apportioned in terms of the relative cost component. And in this case here, the factory only uses 133,000 times the 50%. Okay, there goes 133, 1, 2, 3 times 50, and 66,500 is the rent to be allocated to the factory. Got that, guys? So always look at the additional information. Next one, water and electricity. What do we know about water and electricity? Let's see what we know about water and electricity. Here goes. Water and electricity, 36,000. However, see information 6 below. So the question leads you on to certain information. Let's look at the information below. What does it tell us? Information 6, water and electricity. 15% of the amount is allocated to the office, 15%, 25% to the sales department. Okay, so if I add 25 plus 15 will give me 40. 25 plus 15 will give me the 40. In other words, the rest applies to the factory. If these are percentages, if you take 100% minus the 40, you are therefore left with 60%. Clearly indicating to you what? That 60% of the water and electricity needs to be apportioned to the factory. So, what was the amount? Let's go back to the amount. The amount for water and electricity was 36,000 into my water and electricity, 36,000 times, do you recall the percentage? 60%. That's right. And if we do that calculation, we're going to get a figure of 21,600. Okay, next one, depreciation. What are we told? Let's look at it. It says here, depreciation on factory equipment. Specific, guys. They're not saying depreciation. No, they're not giving you one figure for all the depreciation. They're being specific and saying depreciation on factory equipment. In other words, this is the depreciation for the factory equipment. And now, I know certainly that the entire 52,000 will go under depreciation 52,000 because the expense was specific depreciation on factory equipment. But if the question had just said depreciation, then you'd have to look for additional information to tell you, how do I apportion that depreciation to the relative cost component? I'm sure by now you're getting a clearer picture of what is expected of you. Next one, sundry expenses. What are we told? Sundry factory expenses, okay? There it is, sundry factory expenses. What is the amount? 25,000. Specific sundry factory expenses. Look at the difference. Let me just highlight a difference to you. Watch here. Water and electricity, is any mention been made of the factory? Certainly not. That's why you know how we dealt with it. Information 6 below. But look at sundry factory. It says specifically sundry factory expenses. This means that this entire expense needs to be allocated to where? To my factory overheads. So into my factory overheads, sundry expenses, the amount was 25,000. 25,000. That's it. What have I done? I've now completed my factory overhead cost with all the information that needs to go into this particular note. Just a word of caution. You're going to find items of which we call in accounting a red herring. In other words, they give you this information to catch you out, to see, are you going to allocate this to your factory overheads? For example, look at advertising. Advertising deals with the selling of goods. Therefore, that would be a selling and a distribution expense. Commission to salesperson, same story. These items here deal with selling expenses, have absolutely nothing to do with my factory overheads. Please be careful of these, because these are what we call foreign items. If you put any of these items into your factory overheads note, you're going to find that not only are you going to get it wrong, but it's also going to be regarded as a foreign item. All that's left for us to do now is to add all my items, 1, 2, that means my indirect material, my indirect labor, my factory maintenance, rent expense, water and electricity, depreciation, sundry expenses, add all of these, and I get to a total of 620,110. That's it. I've now completed the note. Which one? The factory overhead cost account. Okay. Now, let's look at what is required of us in the next part of the question. Now this question tells us, if you look at the question here, it will tell you that you have to calculate the production cost statement. Remember? Here's it. Remember I told you we're going to come to this question. Prepare the production cost statement. There we are. There's my production cost statement. Starting off with direct material cost. Now, I've worked that out, haven't I? Do you remember me working it out? Yes, from my note, I've worked out my direct material cost. So this is not a new figure. There's no calculation involved. What is it? It's 1,652,100. Remember, whatever answer you have, where? Let me show it to you so you know what I'm talking about. Let me show it to you so you know what I'm talking about. Remember, there's it in your note. So whatever answer you get here, incorrect or correct, if you use that answer in your production cost statement, you're going to find that let's get to the production cost statement. There's it. Any answer, the point that I'm trying to make here is that this is a principal mark. whatever answer you've calculated, hopefully it's 1,652,100 because we want you to get the correct answer. So if you use that correct answer in here, excellent. But if perchance you've made an error, but whatever answer you've calculated in that note, and if you use it here, you're still going to get the mark for it here in the production cost statement. We've also calculated our direct labor cost, haven't we? What was it? It was 1,451,520. Okay? What are we now going to do? We're going to add these two components. Which ones? My direct material plus my direct labor to give me my prime cost of production, which is 3,103,620. What did I do? I added that plus that to give me that figure. Did I calculate my factory overhead cost? Certainly I did. And I know what that was, wasn't it? Don't I? That was 620,110. Okay? Same principle applies for this one here, for this one here, and for this one here. These are figures that you have already calculated in your notes. By you using those answers in this year, wrong or right, you're going to get the marks in your production cost statement. Why? Because it's a principal mark, it's a method mark, and you've already been penalized in that note. The fact that you use that answer in this year shows your understanding of the production cost statement. So, in accounting, we're not so bad, aren't we? We even give you marks for free. No matter what the amount is, if it corresponds with the note, you get the mark. Come on, we are good guys, man, because we want you to pass, and we want you to pass well. Okay, let's carry on. Total cost of production, I now add that one plus that one to give me my total cost of production, which is 3,723,730. Okay, do you recall when we worked here, what did we say? We said, add your work in process at the beginning of the year. Let's go to the question. Am I given my work in process at the beginning of the year? I'm sure I am. Work in process, beginning of the year, 169,500. So what do I do now? I add my 169,500, 169,500. I add my work in process to give me a work with figure of 3,893,230. Where did this figure come from? It's that figure there, that one, plus that one to give me that one. So I add my work in process at the beginning of the year. What do I do with work in process at the end of the year, guys? Come on. You should be screaming out the answer because we did it earlier when we dealt with the other question. What do we do with our work in process at the end of the year? Yes, we subtract it, always in brackets. What was it? Work in process at the end of the year, 120,600, 120,600. Subtract that figure to give me my cost of production of finished goods, 3,772,630. That was my total cost of production of finished goods, 3,772,630. Got that? Brilliant. Next question. What are we supposed to do? The question says, calculate the unit cost of production. If we go into the question, we'll find it there, so you can see it. Calculate the unit cost of production per plastic bin completed, and therefore, you know what we do? We take our total cost of production, which was 3,772,630. Once again, this figure you're getting from where? Here's it. There's it, guys. Do you see? So if you got some other figure, hopefully not, if you've made an error somewhere and you've used some other figure, but you use that figure here, you're going to get the mark. Because they told us in the question that we manufactured 58,000 units. Therefore, my unit cost of production is 65 Rand and 5 cents. What was that? That is, what does this tell you? This tells you that this is what 1 unit cost you to manufacture. Now, again, an independent question. Cool manufacturers, this business makes plastic vuvuzelas. You remember blowing them not so long ago? Yes. We want you to blow them when the accounting results come out. Definitely you're going to be blowing them. All right, what do they expect us to do? Let's look at the first question. They say here, give one example of a fixed cost. Very simple. We know what our fixed costs are. Rent expense, salaries, indirect wages, etc. Another one says, one example of a variable cost. Which are your variable costs? Your variable costs are those costs that change with production: raw materials, labor, wages, selling and distribution, commission on sales. Because as what do you understand fixed cost? Fixed costs remain constant no matter how many units you produce. Variable costs, they vary with production. Okay, next one. The question said, let's get to the question. It said here, explain why it is important to calculate the break-even point. Obviously, why would you want to do that? So that you can identify potential problems. You can see it well in advance. You can start corrective action. If you remember, the break-even point states that at that point, no profits are made. So obviously, you've set out to manufacture vuvuzelas to make a profit, to determine the minimum number of units. Now, all of these are possible answers. And to produce enough products so that the production level covers all my costs, to identify efficiency, to provide information, to compile the budget, and to ensure that profits are achievable. These are all possible reasons. Okay, so what they said was you have to give an explanation. So you give an answer and you also give an explanation to your answer. So these are reasons why the break-even point is calculated. The next one, they said, use the figures to calculate the break-even point. Let's do that. You start off with your total fixed cost. Do you remember your total fixed cost? And you divide it by your selling price per unit, if you recall, minus your variable cost per unit. Now, your selling price per unit. Let's go to the question and see what do we have. There's my selling price of 480,000. I've manufactured 12,000 units. If I do my maths, I'm going to get an answer of 40. So here, the selling price per unit would be 40 minus variable cost per unit. Let's go in there. Let's take my variable cost. If you take that divided by 12,000, 300,000 divided by 12,000, you're going to get an answer of, let's do that, 300, 1, 2, 3 divided by 12,000 is equal to 25. So therefore, 40 minus 25, this explains to you where the 15 comes from. Okay, do your calculation and you end off with an answer of 14,000 units. Now, you can clearly see in this question, all that they asked you was to calculate the break-even point. Next one. The question says, comment on your calculation in the question. What advice would you offer cool manufacturers? Let's look at this. Right, watch here. Obviously, you can see that we are producing below the break-even point. How do we know that? From our question. Here goes. Remember in the question, what did they tell us? Produced 12,000. What was my break-even point? I calculated my break-even point. Do you remember? 14,000 units. So clearly you can see we are below the break-even point. Therefore, what advice? Look at ways of economizing on fixed or variable costs to reduce the cost so that the break-even point decreases. One possibility. Find a cheaper supplier of raw materials to reduce your unit cost. Avoid overtime because it increases my cost. Train direct workers to work efficiently. Look at the possible responses here, guys. It's open-ended as long as your answer makes sense. Avoid wastage of raw materials to reduce a unit cost. Increase the selling price, provided it does not lead to a reduction in your sales. Spend more on advertising to increase your sales volumes. These are practical reasons you could offer to the people that have manufactured, cool manufacturers that are manufacturing the vuvuzelas. So understand what is the break-even point and also how you can reduce it. That makes more sense because it shows you that you understand what the break-even point is all about. That's it on this particular topic. Like I always sign off, aim for the moon, because if you miss, you certainly will be the brightest, the most shining star we can find in our galaxy. Work hard on your accounting, and remember, until the next time, be good. Bye-bye. Welcome back, matriculants. Yes, to our third session on manufacturing accounts. I can almost see the smile on some of your faces. Why? Because this section is one of the sections that you need to smash in the exams. Why am I saying that? Because this section is obviously, the work that goes into this section is so focused, it's so structured, that once you can answer one or two questions in an exam paper, you know exactly how to go about answering a question of this nature. So once again, manufacturing accounts, I want to see a total on your exam paper, and I'm sure you can do it. Right, let's get into it. Let's look at the question and let's see what is required of us. The question for 30 marks, 15 minutes, always work with your time allocation in the exams. Don't spend too much of time. Like I said earlier, very important, in order to complete your question paper, you need to ensure that you work within certain time frames. Accounting is about testing your time as well. So please make sure that you try to stick as closely as possible to the time guide that's given to you. Question. PD pencil manufacturers, the business produces one type of mechanical pencil. Carrying on with the information, what are we told? The following information was extracted from the financial records of PD pencil manufacturers on the 31st of October 2009. Immediately you know that that is your financial year end, 31st of October 2009, the end of the financial year. Right, important information. So while you're working with your question, as you've seen what I've done, certain bits of information you can highlight, you can underline, so you know exactly what's the end of your financial year. Important. Okay, but before I carry on, I'm going to repeat. And as I said, I may sound like a nag, but I'm going to do it each time I explain. What am I going to do? Yes, at this time, you should know this already. R, T, F, Q. Read the full question. We're not angry, We're not screaming, we're not shouting. Therefore, we'll stick to read the full question. No expletives, right? We're on national TV. Let's carry on. What information is given to me? I'm given information regarding the question. And therefore, what is important for you to do now is to look at this information and look at what is required of you. What are you expected to do? You are expected to prepare the production cost statement. Now at this point, if you look at your answer book, you're going to find that you are given a blank answer book. So this means that when you walk into that exam hall, into that exam venue, you need to ensure that you know your formats in accounting. Please guys, do not walk into an exam room and you haven't learned your formats. If the format is given to you in exam, well done, no problem, but don't expect every format to appear. So therefore, my appeal to you, my prime cost is 2,745,000. Remember, this is given information. Once again, that's where we got it from the information that is provided. Now, let's look at this here. What do we know? What do we know in accounting? What gives me my prime cost? Obviously, my prime cost is made up of two things, direct material plus direct labor. And I have my direct materials and I have my prime cost. So in other words, in order to find my direct labor, what do I have to do? This is what I do. I take my total, which is 2,745,000, 2,745,123, and I subtract my raw materials, the direct materials, which is 1,770,123, which is equal to 975,000. Can you see what I've done? I had to do a calculation in order to calculate what? My direct labor, which is 975,000. In other words, if I add that plus that, what is it going to give me? It's going to give me my prime cost of 2,745,000. Got that? Easy, isn't it? I told you. Just keep focused. Don't panic. Don't go into a panic mode. Unfortunately, with grade 12s, when you see a question mark, immediately you start panicking. Maybe we should put some stars or something like that, just to get the mood a bit lighter. So don't panic. Wait and see, okay. Obviously, they're testing my ability. What do they want me to see? They want me to see, do I know? Do I understand the concept? What concept? That direct labor plus direct materials will be equal to my prime cost. Okay, now what happens is make sure that you know your format. Let's go into the question itself. It says here, now watch, you will notice that I have detail written in already into my answer book. That is because I've done it beforehand. You would have a blank here, and therefore, what I'm talking about when I'm referring to this format, I'm referring to the detail that appears in my production cost statement. You are expected to know it. Please, don't walk into the exam room and you haven't learned your formats. Okay, so we go directly to the question. The first thing that we're required to work out is our direct materials cost. Let's go to the question and see. Do we have it there? In my information, direct raw materials cost. There's my information. Can you see it? Immediately what I do, I tick it off. Why? I'm going to use that information, 1,770,000 into my answer book, 1,770,000. You can clearly see that this was information that I took from my given information. What do I need next? Next, I need my direct labor cost. Can you see that? Direct labor cost. So, into my question, direct labor cost, what? A question mark. Now what do I do? Panic? Certainly not. As I said, don't fear when Ashraf is near. Let's look at the information that's given to us. What do I know? If I look closely at the question, I see that I'm given something that's called prime cost. Do you see that? 2,745,000. So therefore, next one, factory overheads. Let's go and see, do we have that? So as you work on your question paper, make a note. I've dealt with that already. I've dealt with my direct labor. I've dealt with my direct labor. I've dealt with my prime cost. What am I working with now? My factory overheads cost, which is 827,000. So factory overhead cost 827,000. Got that? What do I now do? I add. What do I add? I add my prime cost plus my factory overhead cost. Let me do that. 2,745,123 plus 827,123 to give me a figure of 3,572,000. What does that become? 3 million. Let's get that figure again. 3,572,000. And where did I get that figure from? That figure I got from by adding my prime cost plus my factory overheads to give me 3,572,000. Next one, what do I need? Now obviously, what can you see from this here? If your format is done, immediately it becomes so much easier for you to find the figures that you are looking for, because you focus. Now I need my work in process when? On the 1st of November 2008. So into my question once again, work in process, 1st November 2008. There goes. That's what I'm looking at. 37,600. That's the figure that I'm going to use in my production cost statement, my work in process. Which work in process is this?